Hello, my name is Stephen Denman. My organisation is Shining Guidance. My website is shiningguidance.com. I'm going to talk to you today about the connections between autism spectrum disorder or ASD and sleep problems, the irregularity of sleep patterns that can also include insomnia. Now, we know that individuals who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions can have a lot of trouble sleeping. And there are a range of reasons for this, including the difficulty with just simply being able to relax in the night time and be able to switch the mind down. And perhaps there is an irregularity in the melatonin levels in the bodies of those children who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions. Now, we know that obviously problems with sleep can be an issue for both children and adults with autism spectrum disorder or ASD. It can also be very disruptive to the parents of those children who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD. Because obviously, if their children are constantly getting up, they're making strange sounds, they're having some kind of anxiety problems, a panic attack, they may be having constant nightmares, they are unable to sleep, they shout out for their parents, or they're saying things out loud in their intermittent broken sleep patterns. It becomes very disruptive to the actual sleep patterns of both the father and the mother in the household, which then leads to further emotional and psychological stress for the whole family living in that household. And that in itself compounds the problem and perhaps even causes further sleeplessness for those children who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions. So we need to look at the reasons for this. So we might ask, what is it that prevents any child with autism spectrum disorder or ASD from actually being able to have an effective night's sleep where they can completely relax and they can not have any situation arising where they're waking up at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning and getting stressed out, exhausted, and emotionally and psychologically stressed out, the next day when they're going off to, say, school or college. So, as I've just said, we know that many of these children with autism spectrum disorder, ASD conditions, they have difficulty resting and relaxing, and it's very serious, and they can wake up during the night and have difficulty getting back to sleep. Say, for example, if they've been going to the toilets, and they may actually be going to the toilet because they're actually suffering from nervousness, and that itself perhaps is an indication that they are, going to the toilet as a form of routine and comfort because they may have had a nightmare, or they have sleep disturbances, they're having intermittent periods of insomnia, and they're finding it very stressful trying to relax and switch their minds down and go into deep sleep. Another factor that could be considered in regards to why many children who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions find that they have sleeplessness, they have bouts of insomnia, can be, for example, just literally they're not able to find a method to deal with their own social cueing and integration problems in the daytime, such as in a school or college or a community environment, or even with any relatives in the family. And so those children with autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions probably won't make the connection between their social cueing and integration problems in the daytime that actually lead to a lot of subconscious trauma and sadness, a feeling of isolation, and all of that compounds their original issues of sleeplessness, perhaps to do with anxiety or panic attacks, going to the toilet, feeling perhaps also that they are not adequate or good enough in the minds of their parents, or they're a disappointment because they have autism spectrum disorder or ASD condition. So we have to also remember there's other aspects, one of which I've briefly mentioned, which is there may be an irregularity in the secretion of the sleep hormone known as melatonin, which obviously regulates sleep patterns for both children and adults. Or perhaps those children who are having problems with sleeping properly and having perhaps bouts of, shall we say, insomnia, maybe having atypical circadian rhythms, which is obviously to do with the body clock, where when you go to sleep at night, the body says it just wants to switch down, the mind wants to switch down, it wants to re energize, replenish in deep sleep, and which is biologically very restorative for the human body. Another example, perhaps, of why many children who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions find it difficult to sleep in the night time is because they may have a neurological condition such as epilepsy. So if you've got a neurological condition like that and a child at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning suddenly has an intense outburst in the form of an epileptic fit, that's going to keep both the father and the mother in the household awake, and any other brothers or sisters, brothers and sisters that live in the same house are causing massive amounts of emotional and psychological stress if it becomes a regular occurrence. Another factor that needs to be considered is they may have sensory differences such as an increased sensitivity to blue light from smartphones or laptops or personal computers, certain types of televisions where you have the blue light being emitted from what's called light emitting diodes or LEDs, and this keeps them awake. It's becoming too much of a photonic distraction in the night time, and they find they're not able to switch their minds down and just simply go to sleep. So, it must be very frustrating for them. Another example of what might be a cause of the sleeplessness or the irregularity of the sleep patterns of any child who has autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions could be problems with food allergies, which could cause in the nighttime gastrointestinal issues, indigestion, certain colic or other kinds of digestive discomforts. Or perhaps they have an increased sensitivity to stimulants such as coffee because obviously it contains caffeine, which keeps them awake at night. So, I've given some very good examples there. Another great example of possibly, why some children who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions find it difficult to sleep at night is because they have hypersomnia, which means in small periods they're sleeping far too much. Therefore, they don't feel like sleeping for weeks on end, having regular sleep patterns. They may only get 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 hours sleep in the night. They may not sleep for 3 nights or 4 nights at all. And so literally staying awake. So they're exhausted in the daytime. Then they go into another period of hypersomnia. And then they go into another period of insomnia. And of course, this is again very unsettling for the fathers and mothers in those households and causes a lot of stress for them and all their relatives that are living in those houses. So another example that we need to look at is, the stresses those children feel in being just able to fit into society on a more general level. They have many thoughts that are always, arising in their minds, especially when they're going to sleep at night. So many thoughts, their minds are overwhelmed because of a lot of the trauma and the challenge they feel of daily living, of being able to get up and trying to socially fit in and to conform with the world around them. So it's a very difficult situation for many children, and that itself can also lead to periods of sleeplessness. Now, two individuals who've done incredible research into the entire situation of and shall we say the connectivity between autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions and intermittent or broken sleep patterns are these individuals that I'm about to mention. And one is Dr. David Siegman. He has a bachelor's degree in psychology from the Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. He then went straight on to do a doctorate in clinical psychology from the Graduate School of Applied and Professional Psychology at Rutgers University in New Jersey. He uses effective cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, in his research concerning the problems that arise for children who have sleep patterns and have autism spectrum disorder, ASD. And he specifically focuses on insomnia. So he's an incredible individual, and his work is incredibly valuable and is widely recognised in the scientific community across planet Earth. Another individual who's done very similar work that's also been very beneficial is a lady by the name of Amanda Richdale. Now, she has a bachelor's degree in applied science from the Gordon Institute, which is a technical and further education institute, and it's part of the Victoria Institute of Colleges in the city of Geelong, southwest of Melbourne in Australia. She also has a master's degree in behavioural science and works at the La Trobe University in Melbourne, Australia, which is the same actual educational institute where she got a master's degree in behavioural science. She has a doctorate of behavioural science degree, also from La Trobe University in Melbourne in Australia, and is also the adjunct professor at the Olga Tennyson Autism Research Centre, or the OTARC, at La Trobe University in Melbourne, Australia. And she specifically focuses on sleep problems in reference to autism spectrum disorder, or ASD conditions, in regards to prevalence and causation and intervention, and specialises in aspects of developmental medicine and child neurology. So both these two individuals really are quite unique. They've done incredible research into the connections between autism spectrum disorder, or ASD conditions, and intermittent sleep patterns. So do go and look more at the work of Dr. David Siegman and Amanda Richdale. Both of them are amazing individuals. So I think I've covered a lot of information on the issues to do with sleeplessness or intermittent sleep patterns and autism spectrum disorder, ASD conditions. And I think, you'll find the information I provided in this video presentation to be beneficial, helpful, and insightful. It's an ongoing problem for millions of children who have autism spectrum disorder or ASD conditions worldwide. And it creates a lot of emotional and psychological stress for their parents to deal with it on a consistent basis. And it's also affecting, obviously, their sleep patterns, and obviously sleep patterns of their brothers or sisters, or brothers and sisters in the same households. And all these different aspects of autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, need to be looked at in a more unified and general way on a scientific and academic level, and new methods to deal with the sleeplessness and the insomnia that so many children with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, suffer from, can then be resolved effectively and in a timely manner, hopefully at some point in the not too distant future. Well, I hope you've enjoyed watching this video presentation as much as I have enjoyed giving you this information. There'll be many more videos to come in the very near future. But on that note, folks, I'd like to say I hope you're all well. Please take care, and I will speak to you in the very near future.